Hello. Okay, so we've got Passover coming up. So I have two books that I will be reading today. So I might have some interruptions because I'm not going to lock my dogs up. So just be warned, they might bark. Okay, so the first book I'm going to read is called The 10 Plagues of Egypt. Come hear the great tale of a rich, mighty land whose wicked king wanted to fight God's command. Egypt's king Pharaoh had Israel enslaved, but God had decided that they should be saved. God wanted his people to live by his plan, to follow his law for the good of each man. So Moses was sent to tell Pharaoh God's word. Send out my people, their cry has been heard. But the king saw no reason to set his slaves free. He boasted, no ruler is greater than me. Who is God? Pharaoh laughed. That he orders me so. I rule the Israelites. They shall not go. This foolish king's fortune would soon be undone. Of the 10 plagues of Egypt, blood was plague number 1. Blood oozed from the rivers like thick, sticky jelly. Dead fish made the waters disgusting and smelly. Blood in the bathtub and blood in the sink. No water at all, not a drop left to drink. The only fresh water was found by the slaves. Let us drink, begged their masters, or we'll go to our graves. But the moment the Israelites shared a few sips, the water turned bloody on the Egyptians' lips. Even Pharaoh was thirsty, but still he said, no, they want to serve God? Well, I won't let them go. Said Moses to Pharaoh, why don't you give in? You're fighting with God. Don't you know you can't win? Next came the second plague. Frogs, big and bumpy. They hid in the houses and made people jumpy. They sprang from the rivers, dripping and slimy, rolling in bedsheets and making them grimy. In the kitchens of Egypt, the ovens were shaking, with frogs leaping out of the bread that was baking. Frogs hopped on shoulders and croaked into ears. They made such a racket, it brought one to tears. But the frogs only made Pharaoh's stubbornness grow. These are my slaves. I shall not let them go. Said Moses, 2 plagues, and you still don't agree. Perhaps you will give in after plague number 3. Being cruel to the Israelites carries a price. All of Egypt's dust will now turn to lice. They came for a visit, those unwanted guests, and no magic helped to get rid of these pests. Egyptians tried soaking in rivers and springs, but still could not flee from the small itchy things. Others took cover in tunnels down deep, but way underground, lice continued to creep. Shouted Pharaoh, I'm ruler above and below. Nothing can force me to let my slaves go. But Moses just said, oh, you arrogant king, you've suffered 3 plagues without learning a thing. Then Egypt shook with a deafening roar. Wild beasts stalked the streets in plague number 4. Breaking down doors and charging upstairs were lions and leopards and mean grizzly bears. Egyptians hid, trembling in barrels and boxes, protecting themselves from mad dogs and foxes. Pharaoh hurried to Moses, I'll free them today. Just please have your God drive these creatures away. But when the beasts left, evil Pharaoh said no and took back his promise. I won't let them go. Said Moses, beware, God is fighting our battle, because you have treated us worse than your cattle. Israelites struggle with wagons and plows, while you give rest to your oxen and cows. But the cows that you pamper to grow fat and thick, with plague number 5, will be terribly sick. So ill were these cows, they could not even moo. They lay around helpless with no strength to chew. But the Israelites' cows had no cough and no wheeze, no chills and no fevers, no sniffles or sneeze. Cried Pharaoh, I'm king here, and my slaves must know, if they want to serve God, I shall not let them go. But the greatest of kings have no strength on their own. The power to rule is in God's hands alone. Stubborn King Pharaoh was acting absurd. How foolish to think he would have the last word. God sent plague number 6, hot, watery blisters, on aunts and on uncles, on brothers and sisters, on man and on beast. Those boils kept bubbling all over their bodies, with big blotches were bubbling. It swelled up on bellies, this dreaded disease. It burst out on elbows, on knuckles and knees. Then Egypt was warned about plague number 7. Hailstones, like boulders, would rain down from heaven. Most people did not need to hear any more. They ran into their houses and bolted each door. But the ones who were headstrong ignored all advice, and they stayed in their fields and were struck down by ice. Hail fell down, flaming with flashes of lightning and loud bursts of thunder that made it more frightening. Pharaoh quickly called Moses, "They're free men, I swear," and just then the hail stopped. It stopped in midair. But then Pharaoh laughed for a few flakes of snow. "Did you really expect me to let my slaves go?" Said Moses, "The 8th plague will be armies of locusts." Cried the king, "I'm not afraid of your hocus pocus." Pharaoh's men begged, "Save what's left of our land," but still he refused to heed God's command. The locusts invaded and made their attack, munching grapes from the vines for a mid-morning snack. And when they got down to some serious eating, every tree in the land took a terrible beating. Pharaoh called Moses, he wasted no time. "I've enslaved them too long, I admit to my crime." But when the plague stopped, wicked Pharaoh said no. He again changed his mind. "My slaves shall not go." The 9th plague gave Egypt a horrible fright. 3 days of thick darkness, not one ray of light. For being so wicked, so heartless and mean, the dark was the darkest to ever be seen. Whomever tried walking could not lift his feet, and anyone sitting was stuck to his seat. But the slaves were now blessed with miraculous light. It shone in the daytime and even at night. Pharaoh said, "Moses, I'll free them today. The people may go, but the animals stay." "But our flocks," said Moses, "are needed, you know." "Sorry," said Pharaoh, "I won't let them go." "The 10th plague," said Moses, "is surely the worst. You've time yet to stop it. I'm warning you first." But foolhardily, Pharaoh felt somehow he'd win. His land all but ruined, still he wouldn't give in. In the quiet of night, loud cries filled the air. Egyptians were sleeping and pulling their hair. In the houses of Egypt, the oldest sons died, for no one had listened when God's children cried. "Leave my land," ordered Pharaoh. "I'll surrender to you. Take your people, your cattle, and pray for me too." Egyptians were pressing them not to be slow. "You've made enough trouble. Get moving. Now go." The slaves rushed, not waiting for their dough to rise, But the future would bring them a dreadful surprise. For Pharaoh, of course, changed his mind once again, chasing after the Israelites with Egypt's armed men. Attacked from all sides, they marched into the sea, but faith in God's mercy would soon make them free. The sea split for Israel to cross on dry lake ground. Then it came crashing back, and the soldiers were drowned. Great Egypt lay ruined, with many men dead, and the slaves were now free, with their homeland ahead. No more need the Israelites fear any man. With God as their master, true freedom began. Okay, the end. That is the end of our first book.